Nothing can stop me, I'm all the way.
How's it going, guys? Public Safety Network here. We're going to do another on the job today. This one's going to be a little bit outside the realm of security. It's a job that still kind of, I guess, qualifies into the public safety sector, and a lot of people seem to be interested in, so I'm going to cover it. And that is bounty hunting, bail enforcement, fugitive recovery, whatever name you would like to give it. Most people in that industry have shied away from bounty hunting because it has a very negative connotation that dates all the way back to hundreds and hundreds of years ago, when pretty much mercenaries were hired to go out and find people and then effectively it was killing them for a bounty. So they have changed the name. You may see bail enforcement or fugitive recovery. Those are probably the two most common ones that you will see. And we're going to kind of talk about today. I'm not going to talk about bail bonding in itself. We're going to focus more on the recovery side of it. To give you a brief overview, how the process starts is when someone goes to jail in the judicial system, the judge will set a bond. It could be anywhere from a few $100s all the way up to millions of dollars on a variety of factors, including what the offense was. Add all that in, and then when it comes to bail bonding, it has to be a bondable offense, which means the judge didn't make it a cash bond, which means that that a bondsman can put up the money. And how that kind of works is, if someone obviously doesn't have the money to be able to just put up for their bond right away, they can go to a bondsman. Usually a bondsman will need to take a down payment of I believe it's usually about 10% of whatever the bond is. So if it was $1,000 bond, it would be $100, and then you can usually put up something else for collateral, car, house, some form of property. This is to ensure that the bondsman recovers as much of the money as they can, because if the person absconds and does not show up for court, then the bondsman is on the hook for the remainder of the bond. So if it was $1,000 bond, you paid your $100, and you decide I'm not going to go to court for whatever reason, then the bondsman's on the hook for the other $900. They're given a certain amount of time to be able to recover the person and bring them back to jail before they have to pay the bond. So that's kind of a brief overview of very simplified version of being a bondsman, to kind of get into the transition into bounty hunting or bail enforcement. So most bondsmen, when obviously they have a person who absconds and becomes a fugitive, they will hire a bail enforcement or fugitive recovery agent to go and find them. Usually the bondsman's price on average is about 10% of whatever the bond is. So obviously, again, if it's $1,000 bond, it's $100 payment for finding the person and able to bring them back to jail. So to continue on is, how do you become, how do you get into bail enforcement or fugitive recovery? It depends on your state. One of the biggest things is kind of in most states I've seen, they require you to have some form of registration or licensure. This can widely vary from state to state. In some states, it requires, a lot of formal training. It could be thousands of dollars in fees and licensures. All the way to you get fingerprinted and pay a fee to some government agency, and they pretty much give you a bail enforcement license. Again, it's a very state-to-state issue, and in some states, bounty hunting is actually illegal, where bondsmen are not allowed to operate, and so theoretically a fugitive could abscond to one of these states, and they would be unrecoverable, at least by the agents of the bondsman. So you need to look into what your state requires in order to get into bail enforcement and get an agent's license. Some states allow you to have one or the other. Some states require you to have both. So that's something you need to look into. Also, training widely varies when it comes to bail enforcement and fugitive recovery. Again, some have very formal training where in order to carry any type of weapons, whether that's firearms, tasers, OC spray, you have to have some type of documented training. In other states, doesn't matter. You can pretty much carry whatever it is that you want. I've seen guys that are completely untrained carrying guns, tasers, handcuffs, OC spray, pretty much everything that law enforcement carries with no formal training whatsoever. So again, those are things you need to look into at your state to figure out what you need to do in order to be able to carry any tools that you feel that you need for the job. Same goes with uniforming. Some states allow bail enforcement to work in plain clothes. Other states require them to identify themselves, usually through some type of uniform, whether that's patches, badges, whatever. and again, it's a state issue, so you need to look at your state and see what they require of you. So that's kind of like just the process of overall the becoming licensed and registered, and then there's actually seeking employment with a bail bondsman. Some advertise, some it's kind of someone who's in the industry, and that's how you get in that way. There are plenty of Facebook groups and other networks of professionals, bondsmen, that may post advertisements that they need agents. In some places you can freelance, or you can work for multiple different bondsmen without being formally employed. Usually those would be considered contractors or 1099 employees. In other states, you actually have to be employed by the bondsman and work under their professional licensure. Again, look at whatever your state laws are. So pretty much, what do bail enforcement agents do? Well, their job is to obviously recover people who run. Once the bondsman puts up the cash, it's a promise that the person that took out the bond will return to courts. And obviously, if they don't show up, then the judge will issue what's known as a bench warrant for their arrest, and it's known as an FAT warrant, or failure to appear. At that point, it's all hands on deck, and the bounty hunters will head out, and they will try to locate the person. Usually, a good bail enforcement or bondsman will make sure they have as much information on the person as possible, including known associates, names, addresses, phone numbers, references, pretty much everything they could possibly get on this person to make them easier to track down if they decide that they are not going to show up to court. Other bondsmen and bail enforcement use skip tracers. These are people whose job it is to locate the said person, do the use of a variety of different databases, social media, whatever they need in order to track the person down and be able to get them into custody as soon as possible. Most people ask where bondsmen derive their authority from. Most bondsmen like to quote, or most bail enforcement like to quote the 1885 case of Taylor versus Taylor. That I'm not going to go into the actual court case. You go ahead and look it up if you're interested. But it was the first ever kind of federal case that dealt with bounty hunters. And then obviously they derive their power from whatever the state authority gives them. In most cases, bail enforcement agents can enter the fugitive's private residence in order to make a rearrest. But again, there are rules about how they can enter, possibly what time they can enter, because this is done through usually what's known as tort law or contractual law or contract law. Because pretty much what has happened is the fugitive has given the bondsman or the agents of the bondsman certain liberties when it comes to entering their residence in order to make a recovery. They may not, in almost all cases, they may not enter the residence of another person unless they have permission in order to secure the fugitive. It's a pretty simplistic explanation. Your job is to find fugitives and recover them and then return them to jail in order so that your bondsman obviously doesn't have to pay the rest of the amount, and then obviously that's how you collect your money. Like I say, guys, if you have more in-depth questions, there are Facebook groups and other networks, Reddit forums, things like that, where you can ask more direct questions. This is more of a simple overview of the job. I will tell you this, though: in most cases, it is a very hard job to make a stable career field. I mean, there are plenty of people that do it. That is their full-time employment. For a lot of people, it is a side job. For a lot of people, it is very difficult. Again, because depending on the area you live in, some obviously have more major crimes, so the bonds tend to be a little higher. In some places, the crimes are not as severe, and so the bonds tend to be a little bit lower. You also have to factor in things like you generally will use your personal vehicle, so you have to things like maintenance, wear and tear, gas, use of any additional resources like skip tracing websites, like databases. A lot of these places do require that you do pay some type of subscription fee. If you work in a team, obviously you have to split the money up between the teammates. And then obviously, is there work to be done? In some cases, bondsmen have more cases than they know what to do with, and so there's plenty to go around. In other cases, there may not be very many at all, and so sometimes there's no work to be done. So you can, possibly get 10 cases in 1 month, or you can get no cases for 3 months. It all just depends. And so these are all kind of things that you guys need to factor in when you decide that you want to go into that line of work. Again, most people suggest it as a side job to supplement other forms of income. And I've also seen a lot of guys who retired, usually from law enforcement, kind of do this as a retirement gig just to make a little extra money. I can tell you for a fact, guys, that if you are doing this just to go out and get to play law enforcement, where you get to dress up in a bunch of tactical gear and carry a badge and a gun, or if you were, say a law enforcement reject where you got kicked out of the academy, or you, maybe were caught for a few months and then for some reason quit or got booted off the force, this isn't the job for you guys. They, I've met quite a few bondsmen. Most of them are very professional, and they like to think of this as a professional career, and they don't want a bunch of cowboys going and kind of ruining it for everybody. And you tend to see that a lot. You tend to see guys that act like cowboys, and then they give bondsmen a bad name. One of the biggest examples, and you can go ahead and Google the news article. This actually happened in Phoenix, Arizona, where a group of bondsmen went and they were looking for a fugitive, I believe out of Oklahoma, on drug charges. They knocked on the door, or more like banged on the door, and it turns out that house was actually belonged to the chief of police at the time. It's cases like that make bondsmen look bad and make them look like a bunch of cowboys with no formal training and who have no idea what they're doing. So again, guys, if you're getting into this for the wrong reasons, I would just find another career path to go along. But that's kind of all we really have for today, guys. Again, we're gonna keep doing on the job. It seems like a lot of people really like it, and they seem to want more of it. So again, if you're a bondsman or if you're a bail enforcement agent, go ahead and comment down. Tell us, maybe some tips for people that want to break into the industry. Maybe some things that that you feel are important that I didn't go over. But go ahead and leave a comment section below. Guys, also don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on my other social medias like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And like I said, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope everyone has a safe day out there.